Hi, I'm Patrick, and I'm here with my friend Holly, and he's going to be talking to us today about bilingualism. Is it true, Holly, that a bilingual is one who speaks two languages perfectly?
In her book, Second Language Acquisition Myth, Jennifer Larson mentioned her friend Sadie, who has lived in Japan for more than 20 years, and she attended university and has a fantastic vocabulary along with great pronunciation and speaking skills too. In addition, her kids were mostly raised in Japan and they are dominant in Japanese, the language, not in New Zealand English, their native language. So, yet, Sadie wonders, Patrick, is she really bilingual since she learned her second language as an adult? So the quick answer is yes, she's a bilingual. And we're going to explain that, okay? So Grosjean in 1989, Patrick, argued that it's a misconception to think that a bilingual is just two monolinguals in one. Instead, a bilingual has uniquely developed his own communicative system according to his communicative needs. So, of course, she's bilingual.
Okay, so being bilingual is not the same as being a native speaker. Maybe we should clarify that.
Exactly.
And there are different types of bilinguals.
Okay.
And different definitions of what a bilingual is.
Exactly. So, let's talk first about the definition of bilingualism, a bilingual. Obviously, literally, bilingual. Bi means two, lingua means tongue or a language. So, we could label a bilingual as someone who is perfectly and accurately speaks two languages from birth, right? Well, most people would find this definition an unsatisfying resolution. Okay, and Grosjean identifies that a bilingual is someone who functions in two languages. Only functions, Patrick. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be accurate. So someone who functions in two languages, that's considered to be bilingual. So yeah, we could that doesn't mean that somebody who speaks two languages according to his own communicative needs, that he or she would not a bilingual.
Yeah, and perfect is such a subjective concept. Sorry to say subjunctive. We've been studying grammar. It's such a subjective concept. I mean, you could point to a lot of people in the United States who are native speakers, but they don't have what we would call perfect grammar.
Exactly.
And it's interesting too. I think there's this glorification or idealization of the native speaker that takes place. I remember years ago in Peru, a colleague of mine told me that at one institute, they only let native speakers teach there. And I asked her, well, what is a native speaker? And she said, well, it's somebody who's grown up in a country where they speak English. And I disagree with her about that because there's lots of mixed linguistic households around the world where one parent speaks one language, another parent speaks another language. What about the children of diplomats who go to bilingual schools? So there's a lot of different gradations. But I think when we speak of bilingual, it also has to do with the level of proficiency. So for example, I would not consider myself bilingual in English and Spanish, but I would consider you bilingual in Arabic and English because of your ability to function and communicate. So it also has to do with the level that's achieved.
And also, to be clear, Grosjean again compares being bilingual with being an athlete called a high hurdler. You know a high hurdler who runs and jumps over hurdles. So a high hurdler neither runs as fast as a sprinter nor jumps as high as a high jumper. but his abilities are uniquely suited to this part. So this is exactly what happens in being a bilingual. A bilingual is like he has developed his own unique system according to his own communicative needs.
That makes sense, and it makes sense if somebody's distributing all their creative energy between two languages. They aren't going to have the same sort of dominance in one language that they would have if they're putting all their creative energies into one language. That's really interesting, Ahmed. And here's an important point that might arise, and I know this has been believed, like even in the United States, that raising children bilingually from birth could actually retard their progress in their native language. Could we say this is another myth?
Well, yeah, in my view, yes, it's another myth, because there was a time in the past when people thought that raising children bilingually might be dangerous. Yes, it might be dangerous. And also there were studies that showed that being bilingual affects your IQ.
But in a positive way.
No, in a negative way. So the studies showed that it gives you a lower IQ test.
But could these studies have been using a flawed methodology?
Exactly. Then later, another statistic showed that being bilingual actually is something positive, and all these negative studies against bilingual and in favor of monolinguals were subjective and due to methodological flaws.
Well, I think of the situation like over 100 years ago in, well over 100 years ago now in Louisiana, New Orleans, where French-speaking parents didn't want their children to grow up speaking French because they thought that they needed to be monolingual.
Exactly.
Is there only one type of bilingual?
Well, linguists prefer to add qualifications to the word bilingual instead of just to distinguish between different types of bilingualism, instead of just trying to identify being bilingual, a true bilingual, and exclude all other people who might think themselves bilingual as well. So there are three types of being bilingual, like receptive bilingual, balanced bilingual, and late bilingual. Okay?
Can you explain what these are?
Sure. Let's start with balanced bilingual. Obviously, balanced bilingual is somebody who received balanced input from birth in two languages. So even those who received two balanced input in both languages from birth, they don't have the same level at the two languages at the same time. So they always have a dominant language which is a little bit better and more than the other language, and they even might have even bigger vocabularies than the other language.
And it probably has to do too with the kinds of experiences they have.
Exactly.
With those languages, like the school they went to and learning. But yeah, that's interesting. I think of the situation with Spanish in the U.S. where you can find every kind of bilingual. Yeah, but is that the only kind of bilingual?
Exactly. No, actually, receptive bilingual, somebody who understands the second language very well, but he cannot actively speak and produce this language. So this is also he or she is considered to be bilingual as well. And this is a great example of this, like some percentage of immigrant children who live in the United States. So when children enter primary school and they of course learn the dominant language, in this case in English, they start speak the dominant language of the community, which is English in this example, and to their parents. And however, their parents speak back to them in the minority, in the language, the minor language, the minority. Let's say, for example, Spanish. So they understand Spanish, children, but they cannot produce the language. So, scientific research show that also these people consider to be bilingual as well.
Receptive bilinguals.
Receptive, of course, receptive bilingual. And there is a third one, which is late bilingual. For me, Patrick, I agree with you up to a point when you said that you don't consider yourself bilingual, because in my point of view that being bilingual is someone who speaks both languages according to his communicative need. And you do that, like in Ecuador here, you don't have a translator, you just go out wherever you want, you express whatever you want. So you do speak Spanish very well. So for me, in my point of view, you are considered to be bilingual. And for me, personally, I speak English, Spanish, and Arabic.
So you would be trilingual.
Exactly, Patrick, exactly. So this is a late bilingual, somebody who acquired the language, the second language, as an adult, So they are considered to be bilingual as well.
Interesting. And I really want to ask you if there are studies that show that bilingualism affects in any way the cognitive development of children.
The quick answer is no, absolutely not.
But in a positive way, it could affect them.
Exactly. Like in the past, they were thinking that raising children bilingually might affect their cognitive skills and their cognitive system negatively. While on the other hand, right now, most people recognize the benefits of being bilingual. There are lots of benefits which could be economical and personal and even physical,
But even though they recognize the benefits of bilingual education, still in the United States, it's resisted, and it could be that these myths continue to persist.
Exactly, totally. Totally. Okay.
Is there anything else you want to add about bilingualism before we close?
A study by Pearson, Euler in 1995, found that if the productive vocabularies of a bilingual person, in both of his languages, were added together, that will be equal or even more than monolinguals. So they are almost the same. There's no difference between in the vocabularies, the quantity, the amount of vocabulary between bilinguals in both of their languages and monolingual.
I think in your research you told me that actually most of the world is not monolingual. In the United States, we're the exception, but most of the world is actually fluent in more than one language. Is that the case?
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly.